Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Filmsquid. I'm Steve-O.
And I'm Jake.
And in this episode, we are going to talk about the best films, in our opinion, of the 2010s.
Such a great decade.
The best films of this decade.
In
this
our
previous
opinion.
decade.
In our opinion.
In our opinion, our favorites.
And we do have to throw out a little bit of a caveat. These are just movies we've seen.
Right.
Like, we've seen movies in, like, just the last year that came out in, 2004?
Oh, yeah.
loved them.
I've seen movies in 2010 that I just saw a couple months ago.
Exactly, yeah. This is a tentative list of stuff that we've seen. So this is kind of also an invitation. If you guys have things that are like, you must see this, like you haven't seen this, or how did this not make your list? Well, maybe we've seen it, we just had a different opinion, or maybe we haven't. So
They're most likely all on our watch list anyways.
That's true.
But yeah, if there's something that seems like it's missing from either of our list, let us know, because we want to watch movies that are great.
Yeah.
So we're going to do this in kind of an interview style. You made a list. I made a list. Mm-hmm. We didn't use the same methodology.
No, which is
so we planned it our own way, in our own opinion of our own favorite movies. Mm-hmm. The way you did your list was you did it by categories like genre and overall and just like type of movie. Mm-hmm. And then you listed them kind of like the Cinefix YouTube list style.
Yeah, sure.
Where you have one that's the one that takes the category, and then 4 nominees, and it's just like a thinly veiled top 50 instead of a top 10.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I there's too much this year.
Except you also have another category for shorts, which makes it 11.
That's true. Yeah. And I had to throw in an honorable mention as well.
Of course. Yeah. So, I'm going to ask you about each category and why it's ordered the way it is. And we'll try to get through these a bit quicker.
Because we have a lot. We have it's a big list.
These are, it's 10 years of movies.
Yeah.
Where most of our movie watching has been, especially the ones that have come out. Mm-hmm. Like most of the ones that we've seen in theaters was all in 2010s. Because like before that, we were still pretty young, and we were still watching stuff that was marketed to us, where we didn't have our own ear and eye for films that we like, mm-hmm. movies that we want to see. Mm-hmm. So now we've kind of like lived in this decade as our own people and seeing our own films. So this is like this is like the first year that we can say is like ours.
That's true. That's a good observation. I like that.
So in your bottom category, 11, the honorable mentions, mm-hmm. you have Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Skyfall.
Whew, yeah.
Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol.
Yes, indeed.
Rogue One.
Yep.
And Snowpiercer. Mm-hmm. So out of those, Snowpiercer took the top, I'm guessing. Or which one was the top of those 5? Because I'm looking at it, it's kind of at a disorder.
Yeah, it is disordered. Actually, I gave that one 10. So actually, the top one over there is Megamind. Yeah, exactly. The list actually kind of messed up.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's
right, because then you have 50. Okay, I see.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So you got more audible mentions then that I didn't mention.
Yes.
Okay, this is going to be kind of a rocky start, but okay. So after Snowpiercer, you have Kubo and the Two Strings, and The Wind Rises, mm-hmm. and Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 2, and Avengers Endgame.
Yep.
And then Megamind,
uh-huh.
which is your top of the honorable category.
Yeah, I mean...
which is kind of like throwing a bone to a lesser dog.
Right.
You're like,
it's true.
Here's a treat for the winner of the ones that didn't win.
Yeah, this list... these are ones that were mostly just a ride. The most, you can kind of tell some of the ones that are the most obvious are action adventures or animation. Animation was very hard for me to narrow down.
Oh, yeah.
And I am very sad that Kubo and the Two Strings and The Wind Rises both did not make my top 5 for animation category. If I could be nice, I'd give it to them, but I can't. I had to go by my own rules. But I love those movies. Wind Rises and Kubo are so good. Like, Kubo is my favorite Leica movie. I recommend it to anybody and everybody. And a lot of people all things considered, that's probably Laika's peak.
Yeah.
Everything considered.
Although they came out of the gate running. Like Coraline is really, really good.
Yeah.
Like I'd say Coraline is near first for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And Wind Rises, I love. That was like the first Ghibli movie that I like attached to.
That's the first one I saw in theaters.
Really?
And I watched it with a good group of friends that we watched all of the, well, not all, but a good number of Ghibli films before, like the months before when we just got together and watched movies. Mm-hmm. Strangely enough, we also watched Hitchcock movies. Kind of a weird blend.
Yeah,
Hitchcock and Ghibli. Just kind of like, I don't know, we like movies. Okay.
That's what cinephiles do.
So Megamind is the most honorable of your honorable mentions.
I'm not really sure, actually.
Which actually, that's. I mean, I love Megamind.
That's the only movie.
That is one of the only non-Disney, non-Pixar 3D animated movies that I love.
Mm-hmm. For the same, that's the only movie I can remember in my mind that I watched multiple times the first day.
It's cleverly written. It's very thought-provoking. It's very intelligent. Mm-hmm. It asks a lot from the audience to like figure out, and it's just fantastic in all respects.
Yep. Endgame. We've talked about Endgame.
I think we talked about
massive closing of a book. Yep. Harry Potter Part 2.
There's another closing.
Closing that was done epically. Rogue One, great Star Wars spinoff. Mm-hmm. Possibly one of the best Disney has put out by itself.
I think it's probably the best that Disney's put out since
as far as feature
film. Star Wars.
Yeah. You could argue Mandalorian now, but
that's
TV.
I mean, it's
different format.
Hard to say.
Yeah. And then Guardians just came from nowhere.
Yeah, right.
Epic start to just be added into the thing. Ghost Protocol is my favorite of the Mission Impossible movies. That really, I think that one kicked off the fun feel and the just epic action feel that has become so commonplace in 4, 5, and 6 that have just topped it ever since. And 6 came close, actually.
Fallout's my favorite.
Yeah.
Fallout is my favorite Mission Impossible. Mm-hmm. It's one of the best action films that we've had in years.
Yep. And then Skyfall, by far my favorite Bond film.
Really?
Yes. Casino Royale would be second.
Of course.
I've tried to get a little bit into some of the older ones, but I don't know if they're marketed to me.
Well, I mean, they were, but not exactly you specifically because they came out so long ago.
I mean, I've enjoyed some of them.
It's still an exciting type of movie to watch.
Sure.
Okay. So now we'll get into the shorts. Mm-hmm. So we have Lava, Age of Sail, One Small Step, Paperman, and The Blue Umbrella.
I will be honest and say that this list is a little bit... I was kind of running out of ideas.
Yeah.
I will be honest at that.
Right.
But you'll notice these are all animated. Yeah. But I wanted to mention two in particular, Paperman and Blue Umbrella. Paperman is just... that one, I think, is the best Disney short that has been put out. And then Blue Umbrella, I would say, is Pixar's best. Man. You just go watch them. Go watch them. You can find them easily on, like, Disney Plus right now. They're there. One Small Step and Age of Sail, Lava, all really good. I won't spend too much time on them because we got to move a little fast.
Okay. Good list so far.
Thanks.
So now we're getting into what you call the comedy category. Mm-hmm. So we have Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah.
Knives Out. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Secret Life of Walter Mitty. And The Artist.
Yeah. You've seen The Artist, right?
Yes.
I want to watch that again.
Uh-huh. Especially now that I've seen more silent films.
Yeah. I remember liking it a lot when it came out. And I recognized there was something big, but I also recognized I wasn't seeing all of it. But I watched it, I think I've only seen it twice, and the last time I watched it was like 7 years ago. And yeah, kind of what you were mentioning, I've now seen more silent films. I've gone back and watched
more
them.
to reference from into seeing how they like adapted a silent genre to modern film.
Yeah, I've seen Chaplin's, I've seen Buster Keaton, and they're so timeless though. Those movies are so good. And this one, it harkens back to that classic era of, Hollywood moving from the silent era to the talkies, and that's what this movie's about.
Yeah.
And it's like we've seen that so many times in Singing in the Rain, and this is just watching a dying genre transfer. And it's a person who's not willing to leave that genre, but struggling
almost
to
100 years after that whole thing happened.
Mm-hmm. And it tells it just as potently. Secret Life of Walter Mitty, I think one of the best feel-good movies from this last decade. A little formulaic in some ways, but I didn't care. I just was like, this is so good. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, we've talked about that. Knives Out, talked about that. Jojo Rabbit, we've talked about that a little bit. Jojo Rabbit actually might climb up again, though. I've mentioned I want to see it again. Mm-hmm. And I also want to see Hollywood again. So that back end might change a little bit, but I don't see them climbing up to where the artist is, which is funny because I haven't seen the artist in so long and it's up there.
Right.
I'm curious to see what happens when I watch that one again.
Curious about some of these being considered comedy.
Well,
because it's kind of a loose... You're taking like a Golden Globes approach to the word comedy.
You got me there. I can't wiggle out of that.
Like, how is some of these movies considered? I'm just talking in the Golden Globes in general. Like, how are these considered comedies?
I mean, comedy is basically anything that's not anything else.
Anything
specific.
That's like very tragic.
Yeah, or
throughout. Yeah,
or dealing with really difficult issues throughout, difficult themes. So that's probably what I was thinking for that one.
Okay, we're moving pretty fast, but we do have a lot more to cover. So the 8th category you have is the thriller/horror genre. Mm-hmm. And so you have Rise of the Planet of the Apes. Mm-hmm. You have Prisoners. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A Quiet Place. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Get Out. And Parasite.
Yeah. So this one is, I feel, for me, the most underwatched category ever.
For you personally, yeah.
For me
personally. Because it is one of the most watched categories overall worldwide.
Because horror and thriller are so easy to communicate across borders. And
it's one of the
languages.
easiest. It's not one of the easiest things to portray, but it's one of the easiest things to get a rise out of audiences.
Mm-hmm.
It's just showing something that's terrifying.
Yes. Fear is one of the easiest.
And there's ones that do it great, and there's some that don't do it so well, but there's enough people that put out so many good films that get that.
Right. That being said, I would invite more opportunities to watch good horror, or good thriller, or just that big heart pumping movie. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm not a huge horror fan. I don't mind saying that, and I'm more tentative about that thing.
I used to be against watching horror films. Now I'm kind of interested in specific ones.
I'd be in that same category. Like
for me, it was always kind of a turnoff just in general, mainly because of jump scares and because most of them tended toward the gore and just the
demonic or something like that.
Like, ugh.
Yeah.
Just gross and yeah.
And I still am like, no, I don't.
But
really
we've seen enough now that like there's a whole lot more to that than just that typical horror stuff.
Like Get Out addresses the horror and the fear of a society. Mm-hmm. Quiet Place addresses the horror and the fear of don't make sounds because we are under attack by an alien species. Prisoners is a thriller, not quite a horror, but a thriller about a very real life situation that
something that could happen.
Yes,
with real people doing real things like that is
right. And then Parasite, it's again thriller on social commentary. And so Parasite could actually be anything. That's probably the most
that's one of the most fluid ones in terms of genre.
I was trying to find out where I should put Parasite, and I was like,
it works in thriller.
I'll put it in the thriller because that's the strongest feeling I walked out of the theater with. Mm-hmm. It's just like the, whew.
Your heart pumped.
Whoa, what did I just watch? Because that's what it does. Rise of the Planet of the Apes, I realize, is not the best movie. But
which I still haven't seen. So
I won't say much about it then.
I know it's Matt Reeves.
It just
doing the Batman.
It just beat out Super 8.
Really?
It was one of those two, and I was like, I like
love
Super 8. Yeah. This one though, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, there's just something about it that's really, I think, at the end of the day, I think it comes down to Andy Serkis's motion capture performance as Caesar. I love Andy Serkis's acting in the Planet of the Apes trilogy that has just come out. It's so he is the heart and soul of it, and he does it so well. And there's a reason he was forefronting, motion cap being an option as best actor or best actresses.
Right.
He makes a good point because he's doing such a good job communicating emotion through technology, and it gets the point across extremely well. And it's kind of a thriller. I mean, it addresses what happened before Planet of the Apes, so there's some elements of fear in it. But that's not the main issue. This is just a story about an ape who's super intelligent who has to transfer through that period.
The only Planet of the Apes I've seen?
Is it you're not going to say the first one.
No,
it's the Tim Burton one. Oh my God. You should have, even the Charlton Heston one's better.
Didn't they have a TV show? I think I saw some of that.
I don't know.
If they had a TV show, Planet of the Apes, I think I saw some of that. And I do believe they did.
They've got a bunch of old ones,
like old back in the 70s or 80s or something.
They did a lot of spin-off like direct-to-video movies.
Maybe it was that. I don't know. I saw some pieces of that, but I never got into that. And then I don't know how or why I saw the Tim Burton one. It was a long time ago, though.
I mean, it was right there.
Yeah.
It's forgivable.
Okay. So the next category, we've kind of gotten into this over the years. Every once in a while, we just kind of get into mode. The seventh category that you have is Western.
Mm-hmm. Which thankfully is making a comeback.
I mean, it's been making comeback, they're making more of them.
Every once in a while, someone takes a gamble, but it almost always pays off.
Right. There hasn't been a good season of Westerns since the 70s. Yeah.
I mean, the last great classic
but it's always
Western
been,
was
it's always
Unforgiven.
been just a cornerstone of Hollywood.
It's been a cornerstone of America.
Even back in the 20s when when the Wild West was still around, they were making some silent films about it. Like Jack Kelly Gang is one of the first feature-length films.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the silent about the Jack Kelly Gang that just they're cattle wrestlers and cowboys and they're just wild bandits. So in this category, you have The Ballad of Buster Scruggs.
Yep.
And then Hell or High Water.
Wind River is at the back, actually.
Oh, right. I forgot that. Wind River.
Yep.
Ballad of Buster Scruggs, Hell or High Water, Django Unchained, and True Grit.
See, this one was competitive. I like Hell or High Water.
I mean, I'm surprised. It's nice that there's that many to choose from, and there's more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Wind River, I would describe, I've talked about it a little bit. It's more of a neo-Western, not really a Western.
But it uses a lot of the same Western
Western tropes, motifs, and all that. And I have... Taylor Sheridan, my man, he's making a new movie this year. We'll talk about that later. I don't think I've walked out of a movie more angry at injustice than this movie. And I wanted anyone who... It's not a great feeling to walk away with, but I wanted anyone who's done anything wrong.
You don't want that kind of bitterness in your life.
Yeah.
As you don't want it to stay.
No, I walked away angry at people who have hurt people. Mm-hmm. And oh man, that doesn't happen much. But anytime that high of an emotion rose up in me, I can't ignore it. Mm-hmm. It's impossible to ignore. Buster Scruggs, just a fun ride.
It's going to surprise me.
It's a fun ride.
I didn't expect it to be that high, although it's one of the only Westerns that have been out in the last couple of years. I thought Wind River would kind of probably be higher.
I think because it was a negative emotion that I walked out with, that's probably why I knocked it that low.
Okay. I mean, it's entirely your opinion, so
yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Also, Taylor Sheridan, though, Hell or High Water, little bit the opposite side. It walked away with a positive feeling. Horrible things happen in it. It's not friendly, but I really enjoyed that one. I want to watch it again. That one, oh man, I can't even. It's hard to describe that one because we've talked a little bit about it, but he's not afraid to touch on things that other people are, specifically stereotypes or commentary that is maybe considered PC. Now.
Oh yeah,
and
definitely.
And he just punches through that. He's just like, I don't care.
Yeah,
and neither do my characters.
Yeah,
but he puts it in a way that's it's okay to be that way still. There are still people that you can be friends with who maybe don't even agree with that, and we can still all get along very well. And I like that message. Django Unchained. Whew.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Tarantino, top 2 movie of my Tarantino movies. That one's just great. More of a Southern, as he calls it, but it's great. True Grit, just watched it the other day again for like the 10th time this year.
Yep, that's not going to leave top lists of any kind. When if it's in there, it's going to be way up there.
Yeah,
for a while.
Yeah, that's one of my
like
favorite
that's up there
ever.
in westerns. My favorite westerns. It's just up there.
Mm-hmm. That's one of my favorite movies, actually.
No doubt.
So kudos to that one.
Okay. So the 6th category is war.
Plenty to pick from that one.
We have Lone Survivor,
Mm-hmm.
Hacksaw Ridge, Dunkirk, American Sniper, and 1917.
What else? Okay. Yeah.
I kind of saw this list coming. Like,
yeah, 1917.
I saw this list.
Couldn't be anything else, honestly. American Sniper hit every point that it had to just right. Like it wasn't leaning like it's Clint Eastwood, and it wasn't leaning to the right. It wasn't leaning to the left. It just presented a reality of a man's life, and everyone went crazy over it. It was so good. I think that was my first R-rated movie. Actually, I saw in theaters. I think it was in 2014 that it came out, and I wouldn't have picked anything else. I am so glad that was my first R-rated movie. I wanted to support that one. Dunkirk, Nolan, again, just
and we saw it in
thing.
70 millimeter.
70 mil. That was the first time I think I had been to the Hollywood Theater. Was 70 millimeter for Dunkirk.
That's right.
And that was so amazing. Like I couldn't.
And I saw it twice.
I couldn't. Yes,
I just had to put that in there.
Thanks. Okay. Whatever. So
I know there's no other way to experience it.
Watching that though was so cool. I remember saying when we were talking about it on this podcast a while back, I couldn't take my eyes off the theater. I couldn't even really focus. In fact, I forgot to focus on Nolan's non-linear timeline structure until halfway through, and I was like, I'm stupid. Of course this is non-linear, but I haven't been paying attention to that.
Just because it's such a spectacle.
It was a spectacle, and then I had to go see it again so I could concentrate.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, now here's the story. But Dunkirk was so amazing. What was right after that? Hacksaw Ridge. Very good movie. Very, very heartfelt movie. My favorite part of that actually though is the credits. The actual interviews. Definitely. Which just drove home so many things that were happening in the movie. And that's where, this is a plea to the audience, that's where just a little bit of research about movies goes such a long way. Because people throw in details into movies that just fly over our heads. But those were often real events or influenced by such incidents that were so impactful. And it adds a completely undertone to the movie that just...
Stuff that's not even known.
Exactly.
That's
but
like,
all you need to just do is go find it.
It's known enough in the people who are paying attention, but it's just unknown in the general mass of the society. But it's such an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then Lone Survivor. Oh man, that one was so good.
That was hard to watch.
It is, but it introduced a layer of the Afghanistan war that I was not aware of. I was kind of aware of, but it showed that there was more depth and more involved than what we probably see at home. Because all we saw at home was, more soldiers are dying. Mm-hmm. Well, why were they dying?
Yeah.
Like, what was the actual situation that they were being in or being tossed into? It was very complicated, and a lot of times it caused more problems than it gave back. But this is a give back movie. Mm-hmm. Like, they got thrown into a situation where they have to choose between letting people go or not, because they know they're going to get attacked if they let prisoners go. That's just how this area works. Mm-hmm. But then, surprise, they get help from people who you would expect them not to. And it's just more dimension than I was expecting out of that one. So I appreciated that one.
Okay.
We're getting there.
Next we have category 5, historical.
Mm-hmm. This was tricky. Okay,
so we have Steve Jobs, Saving Mr. Banks, First Man, Les Miserables, and Lincoln.
This is an interesting category because...
Which I kind of called the Lincoln being up there.
Yeah,
so.
Good job. Good work.
As soon as I saw historical, I'm like, okay, Lincoln's probably on the top.
So
I'm just reading this. I'm just looking at your list again. Like, I looked at it before, but now I'm like, I don't remember. So just, it's fun for me to guess what your top one for these categories are, and then being right most of the time. I'm just like, yep, cool.
Yep. You know me well.
Steve Jobs. What about Steve Jobs?
So Steve Jobs.
Why is it in the historical category?
Well, see, this movie should be...
Is this the category just more like biographical?
See, almost every movie that is in this entire list could be thrown into historical. And I understand that. So this is kind of like the comedy where it's a bit of a toss-out, and I just couldn't ignore them, though. I had to I had to give these movies a section of their own. Because it could be all over the place. Like, this is a time period that expands over 300, 400 years.
Yeah.
So Steve Jobs, that I've talked about this one before. That is a movie, but that by all standards should only be in theaters, and it should fail on screen. But Aaron Sorkin's writing provides such a huge... It's so magnetic. You can't take your eyes off the screen because it's essentially a 3-act repeat of itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be bored by Act 2. No, you're not. This is a movie about Steve Jobs releasing what was the first product that they ever released? Was that the Mac?
The Macintosh.
They released the Macintosh, and then they released the Black Box, I think, when he had left Apple. And then it was the release of the iPod. And it was the moments leading up to the press conference where he released it to the world every time. And he meets the same people, has a lot of the same conversations. It should fail. The way I'm describing it, this shouldn't work. But please
Aaron Sorkin is just a genius.
He is a master writer. He's got a master class for good reason. I actually kind of want that one. This thing does not release your attention. So that's why that's here. Saving Mr. Banks, very heartfelt. It's just to talk about the backstory that makes a story. Like, I love Mary Poppins. This is a movie about the backstory that gives the heart to my favorite story. Mm-hmm. There is no way this movie was going to not be loved by me. And I knew it going in, and it delivered so well. Saving Mr. Banks is amazing. First Man, oh my goodness. Visual effects are out of this world.
Oh, yeah.
The story of the man who goes to the moon is also very incredible. I haven't seen it since. I want to show it to people still.
Mm-hmm.
But that was probably one of the more... Was this 2018 that this came out? I think so. That was probably one of the most intense theater experiences I can recall. Just that alone is enough to propel it in there.
I still just... every time I think about the lunar sequence, I still get chills. I'm like, oh.
The lunar sequence.
Every time I look at the moon, at a full moon, I'm like, oh. Because I just remember that.
Mm-hmm.
That first shot of them coming over and finally seeing the moon right there, right smack in their faces.
Yeah.
And then everything after that is just, oh.
Yeah, that's a good movie.
And on top of that, it has some of the best production
design,
time period, picturesque looking
production design,
aesthetic design,
cinematography, the
aesthetic
sound
design
editing.
For the 60s.
Yes.
It's just so palpable.
Mm-hmm. It feels like you just stepped in.
Which is just Damien Chazelle flexing on everybody.
Damien Chazelle rocks.
Yes.
And then Les Miserables, I just cry every time I watch it or listen to it. Such a powerful movie.
As you do.
As I do. Jean Valjean's my hero. And Lincoln, it's a movie about politics. And that was still an era where I loved watching political movies. It didn't matter what they were about, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the backstory of that. And just Daniel Day-Lewis has disappeared into the role
completely.
Of Lincoln. Changed how we think about Lincoln, too. Just the voice that he does.
Oh, yeah.
Normally we gave Lincoln, or actors gave Lincoln, a really deep baritone voice, though writings described it as kind of higher pitch. Daniel Day-Lewis said he heard something in his head and grabbed onto it. And that's how I think of Lincoln now. Every time I see a deep voiced Lincoln, I'm like, you're not doing it right. Sorry.
Unless it's satire.
Yes, true.
Then it's just like you can do whatever.
Yeah, but Daniel Day-Lewis just changed it.
Okay. Now we have your fourth category, animation.
The toughest one to pick from.
So we have The Breadwinner, Loving Vincent, Toy Story 3, The Lego Movie, and Tangled.
See, Breadwinner, I tell everybody who is an animation fan to watch this one. This is my...
I'm getting around to it.
Yes, you will. Breadwinner is amazing. Loving Vincent, I have only seen once.
And it still has.
The more I think about it, the more I love it. I just can't.
Just the sheer logistics of doing that and still having such an engrossing story and such an engrossing movie.
I don't understand.
It's just how did that get made, and how is it still incredible? Like, it could have been made and just been beautiful and been like that's an interesting story.
Exactly.
It's like, I appreciate it for the animation because it's just literally paintings. But no, it's actually like a good movie, a good story.
That I don't understand that one yet. I'm being perfectly
we'll
honest about
probably
that
have
one.
to see it again.
No, we will see it again. I'm trying to get my family to see it too. Toy Story 3, a closing movie, closing to one of my favorite trilogies ever. We've talked about Toy Story 4 and how I felt about that. Toy Story 3.
Why isn't this on the list? Oh my gosh.
Toy Story 3 was, is kind of a reflection of just my stepping up through movies and childhood, actually. So that was like
for all of us this age, we all watched the Toy Story movies.
That was the first movie I saw in theaters, though, in 95.
Oh, yeah.
I don't remember it, but apparently it left such a huge impact on me that it stayed with me. But the movie literally tracked me through my life. Like, Andy is graduating and going away at the same time I was graduating.
Same.
And 2010, I've mentioned this before, I think has been one of the pinnacle years of movie watching for me, because that was the moment where I just realized what you could do with them.
And it was also when we could actually go watch movies that we wanted to watch on our own.
Yep. And so that was like the end of, the nostalgia period.
And there was a lot of good movies in 2010.
Yes, there was. Yes,
the standout years in this decade are 2010, 2014, and 2019 for me.
Yeah. I would come very close as well. So that Toy Story 3 was literally like goodbye to this is the end of the nostalgia era of movies you've seen over and over and over, but now it's time to start watching new things.
Right.
And then Tangled, best Disney revival era movie. And how? I mean, there's so much good things about that movie. Favorite Disney princess movie that they've released. I think it's my fourth favorite Disney animation overall.
Wow.
The 3 would be like your Aladdin's, Beauty and the Beast, and Lion King. And then Tangled's right there at 4. So Tangled goes pretty darn high. And I imagine most of our audience has watched Tangled by now. If you haven't,
well, yeah.
Where have you been?
I think everybody's at this point, they've probably all seen it.
Yeah.
Okay. That was your top of animation. Your third category is drama.
Yeah.
And right out, we start with Little Women.
Yes.
And then Leave No Trace. The last 2 years. And then The Social Network. And then Moneyball. And The Help.
Yep.
Both of those last ones, The Moneyball and The Help, I haven't seen.
You have not seen The Help?
Nope. I know.
Huh.
I know, it's yeah.
We should fix that soon. Okay. So Little Women we've talked about, great movie, and we've actually been listening and studying it a bit more about how it was made and the details behind it. It just gets better and better and better. Leave No Trace, very personal. Very personal movie. There's not a lot, in your face about it, but it's just so connected.
It tackles some of the hardest issues that we've like come across. Like other movies try to do it, or they have themes, just very small themes about those, but not to this level.
Yeah.
And not with this much grace and gentleness to it.
Yeah, that's what got me. And not to mention that it was filmed here.
Yeah.
And it's the way that it's just...
And we know someone who was on the crew.
Yes, we do. And yeah, there's this movie gives me a lot of encouragement of using what I see around me. Like it was a good example of that. Social Network, my favorite David Fincher movie I've seen so far. I think it was my first one too. So maybe I wasn't quite sure what I was watching, and there might just be that first time experience. But Social Network deals with some really cool stuff, and the way that it's written, the way it's presented, is very fascinating. Moneyball, this one's a little bit of a fling into some list. I will admit it's my favorite sports movie that has come out. I could have thrown it into many other categories, but I had to throw it in this one to make it work. But Moneyball is it's so good. It's like it's about baseball. It's about the dealings and the backgrounds of baseball, and there's some lines in there that really mean a lot to me. I will say this. I have to go nostalgic for a second. There's a line in Moneyball that says, when you're a baseball player, there comes a time when we're all told we can no longer play the children's game. Some of us are told at 18, some of us are told at 40, but we're all told. Huh. I didn't understand that for a while, but then I had just stopped playing baseball a year before this came out. And then I finally understood it, and I was like, you know what? I can't play baseball anymore. That's true. I don't think I will ever play baseball again.
Well, other than like a friendly game.
Other just a friendly game, but that doesn't count.
Yeah.
That's not the
like
game.
In a team against another team. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, that's a sad thought, but this is the life afterwards. So baseball's not done. This is about a man who just loves the game so much and he wants to succeed at it. And that meant a lot to me. And The Help, I won't say much about The Help, but we got to watch it soon.
I mean, it's up there. It's topped your list for drama.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I understand not saying anything about it.
We're going to watch it. I'll just say that. Okay.
Done deal. Okay. So the second to last category of yours on your list is the big budget action adventure.
Yeah.
Just the ones that tent poles, I guess.
Yeah.
So we have Star Wars The Force Awakens, Mad Max Fury Road, Baby Driver, Captain America The Winter Soldier, and The Avengers.
Man, I wish Iron Man was just a couple years later just to top this list. Because it looks like I'm ignoring it, but I'm not. Force Awakens, I can say what I want about Star Wars right now. Force Awakens, when it came out, we were ready. I was ready. I was not old enough to be critical of it at that point. Like, there was the old Star Wars fans who were like, it's just okay. I was not there. I'm still not there, even after now. Force Awakens is great. I love watching that one by itself. And it sets
which is
up,
so sad to say.
It is sad, but it's like, it sets up a perfect beginning. That was a perfect beginning of a story, and I didn't care that it was derivative of Star Wars tropes. I was like,
even if you took out a few elements, it wouldn't be as derivative as it seems.
They're all derivative of the first one anyway.
Yeah.
So true. I didn't care. So that was totally fine with me. Mad Max Fury Road. I have never seen anything like that. I still haven't.
How many times have you watched it?
1.5.
I've seen it like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
It gets better every single time.
I imagine. I want to see it again.
George Miller is a mad genius.
He looks like a mad genius.
He looks like a mad genius. He is a mad genius. And not just in the action crazy set piece and just like from one shot to another, just having something awesome happen. But he's a mad genius in terms of like emotional, thematic, symbolic, like you name it, he's just a genius at it. And so many of the directors that admire him have talked about him, and they can't wrap their heads around how he did what he did in Fury Road. He's just ridiculous. It's like, I could never, ever do that. If I spent the next 40 years trying to accomplish that, I couldn't do it as well as George Miller did it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah, that is his movie with his stamp, and it shows.
It's unfortunate that we're probably not going to see another one because he's pretty old now.
Well, he wants to.
And the studio system isn't really
because
simpatico with him right now.
Fury Road was in production hell for, 20 years?
Yeah,
something like that. Yeah, it took a long time. It paid off very well, but you mentioned that like they want to do a Furiosa spinoff.
Which, if they do it, it's not going to be as big.
No, it's not.
It can't be as big as Fury Road.
No, it will either.
It's still
going to
have a lot of that same flavor and that same stuff, but it's going to be more.
It will be a prequel. It'll be more character
one
study.
Single,
So
about Furiosa,
which is fine.
This is the main character of Fury Road, anyways. So
yeah, that's totally fine. I'll watch that any day. But it's not going to be the experience, the spectacle, the grandeur. Speaking of
if you haven't seen Mad Max Fury Road, just
go watch it.
Go watch it.
Yep.
I highly recommend it. It's not just a crazy testosterone filled action. It's got,
if you want that, go watch the Fast and Furious.
It has plenty of that, but it's not Fast and Furious. It balances that with a lot of true emotion, and there's so many female characters that really like outshine every other character.
Oh yeah, totally.
It's filled to the brim with like actual like good female characters and like incredible stuff that they do.
And this was before female characters were even being like, you must have a female character. No, this was just George Miller going, I want a female character.
Yeah.
This is what this is where it's going to be.
That's what the story's about.
Yep. And then the next one, kind of similar, but very different in style. Baby Driver.
Has a very unique style.
Very unique. He's got a new movie coming out this year. Excited for that.
Oh, yeah.
Baby Driver was just a ride. And I'm not even being sarcastic.
That's another one that's been in the works for almost 20 years.
Well, he released that short film. That was basically
a long time ago, but he's had it as an idea for a long time.
This is what I want to do if it ever comes. And boy, did it ever come.
And you know what he said?
What?
He said that this movie, back when he first had the idea, he's like, this is not an English movie. This is an American movie. So before he even made all the other English movies, he's British himself. So like before he even made all those other ones, he had this idea for this film. And he's like, I'm not going to make this in London. I'm going to make this in America. Well, you can't make it in London, especially now. Like, because London is like anti car chase. Like there's just no way. The layout of the roads.
Yeah, no
way.
Yeah, it shows. It shows he knew what he was writing.
Oh yes.
Topping this list are two Marvel movies, what I think are the best Marvel movies that they have thrown out aside from Iron Man. That would be Winter Soldier and Avengers. Winter Soldier is just ageless, which can't be said for many of the other Marvel movies. They're made for the moments.
Yeah.
Winter Soldier actually has a very difficult and talked about theme and has been talked about for years and will be talked about for centuries down the road. Security versus liberty.
Yep.
What do you want? This movie tackles it extremely well. And this is almost not a superhero movie. There's no superhero in the movie. Like Cap is like
he's a super soldier, but it doesn't really shine in this one like it does in Captain America or Civil War.
Right.
Like his supernatural ability.
This is a man who is just dealing with the times.
Espionage and betrayal and just all these things that you don't expect.
Mm-hmm. But on the superhero theme, we have Avengers.
Which started the whole entire thing.
Joss Whedon was the perfect pick to ramble in all of these personalities, these stories, and bring them into just one shining moment. And I remember actually watching this. I think that this is not really... The Avengers almost... When I watched it again in preparation for Endgame, the Avengers actually took a bit of a backseat. This was more of a S.H.I.E.L.D. movie, I was noticing. And their reaction to how do we put the Avengers together? How do we make them work? So Nick Fury was kind of like the head. And if you watch it just by itself without, Nick Fury's so cool. Nick Fury is almost the bad guy. there's a lot of deception. Like, you see a lot of roots that are placed further down in this movie that maybe he's not the guy we all thought he was.
And you know what's interesting
at the time, we didn't think about that.
What's interesting about the Avengers, Iron Man started it, and it did so well just straight out. First thing, really, and it just like shines so bright. All the other ones that came out, you just kind of watched, but they weren't as good nearly at all.
As Iron
like
Man,
there's still like the ones between Iron Man in those 4 years between Iron Man and the Avengers, those ones are still counted as like lower on the list of MCU movies because they just don't compare to these two movies. And then Avengers comes and then it's like, okay, the MCU is a real thing. Yeah.
Yep. And it's just, oh wow. How they did that, I don't know.
So, in your number one category of your favorite list, your list of your favorite movies from this last decade, the 2010s, is the general best pictures.
Yeah.
We have Martin Scorsese, Hugo. Yeah. We have Christopher Nolan's Inception. We have Phil Lord and Chris Miller's Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
We have Damien Chazelle's La La Land.
Yeah.
And we have Tom Hooper's The King's Speech.
Okay. Really quickly, Hugo.
So that, just for a second.
Yeah.
That's a little unexpected.
Yeah.
Given, well, I mean, it is kind of like a bit easier to accept it, especially because a lot of these genre categories you have the ones I would expect at the top of those genre ones.
Yeah.
But some of these I was like, interesting.
Really?
Why is Hugo so high up here?
Hugo is high up here because at the time I had not seen, I think I'd only seen one or maybe zero Scorsese movies. And I knew he was a master. This was just coming out.
Anything about film and it's like Scorsese's up there
is in
somewhere.
The conversation, yeah. And this was kind of an autobiography of his. And
a hidden autobiography.
Yes, it's about a boy discovering his love of movies, which I was just doing at the time. I was just 2010 I realized what movies could do. In 2011 I was starting to watch what movies could do, like, and understand what movies could do. And Hugo was a beginning for that. And
I'm so glad you said that because that was my same feeling for this one and another movie which I really want you to watch. It's an Italian movie called Cinema Paradiso.
Oh, I recognize the title. Okay.
It is a similar story of a young man, a young boy, fostering his love of cinema, of movies, of film. And it's such a touching film to watch. And it goes along the same lines. Like if I would, out of any of the films that I would pick for, let's say, like a double feature, I would go Hugo and Cinema Paradiso. Definitely.
Okay.
They're very similar in terms of character and theme. They tackle completely different time periods and settings, and different genres even. But they both have that infusion of discovering and loving cinema and loving movies.
Yep. It's just super personal for me. Inception is my favorite of Christopher Nolan, who is my favorite director. That I think is his pinnacle movie of how to make a story that is masterful, that is intelligent, and still be accessible, if that makes sense.
Well, where the audience can still figure it out on their own.
Yes, and continue to talk about it years to come, and we're still trying to figure out what happened and we can make.
We all have our own pet theories of how it's supposed to be or what we think is happening in between the lines.
And so, he's just one of my favorite example directors that I will be using. Into the Spider-Verse, we've talked about many times. This movie, it has such heart to it and such talent and skill. Unseen, we had no idea what was going to happen. It turned out to be this a master. I can't credit that one enough. because the same year they had released Emoji Movie. How do you go from Emoji Movie to Into the Spider-Verse?
Come on, Sony.
What do you... I mean, I'm glad they can put out good stuff.
Right. If they have to put out trash in order to put out something like Spider-Verse, then I am okay with that.
I am just fine with that too. Everyone go watch Into the Spider-Verse.
Even if those trash movies still sell tickets, like, that's fine, because then they make money so they can make these great other movies like Spider-Verse.
La La Land was, a movie that... I hope it's a return of musicals. I think it's tentatively that. A return of musicals, a love letter to Hollywood in movie format, maybe a little less under the nose as Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was. Right. So it hit a little bit deeper. It was a very powerful love story that I think reflected reality a lot.
And relatable, too.
And relatable, and reflected reality in a very gentle and touching way. And some people didn't get it. I've talked to people who hate Hollywood or La La Land because of the ending.
Yep.
Or how it ends. I am okay with it to this day. I have experienced a lot of that same thing.
Well, it's that same kind of like endless point or endless argument of like, well, you just didn't get it. You want things to be tied neatly with a bow at the end. It's just like how with some of these great stories that you remember, things aren't tied together so neatly. Like with La La Land, it's a messy end.
It's a messy end, but the nod at the end...
Not messy in terms of filmmaking, but
well, it's
messy
not perfect.
Emotionally messy.
Yes, it's...
But what the characters actually go through. Yeah.
I love the nod at the end, though, because it's the, we'll be okay. It's bittersweet, but we'll be fine. You'll be fine, I'll be fine. And I appreciated that. King's Speech.
So... people who are listening to this might not know this. I know this because I just spent enough time with you talking about movies, but people might not know that King's Speech is one of your favorite movies ever. And also now, like...
it's in the top 4 favorite movies
decade.
on my Letterboxd list. You will see it right at the top.
Why is that?
Why?
Because I think it's a great movie. For me, it's not like the best, and I wouldn't put it as high as you do. I can see why you do, but I want to know like what's under the surface here, so, just for people to understand your point of view. Because I've heard it enough personally, one-on-one with you.
Right.
But let's get your actual opinion of the King's Speech on the podcast.
So there's a few things going into this. The King's Speech, when I first watched it, it was in 2010. It was probably the most experimental, like the filming style was probably the most experimental I had seen yet. I didn't understand it. It was very odd. It was a little off-putting, actually. So when I first watched it, I recognized, I was at least intelligent and smart enough to recognize that something was happening very big on the screen that I did not quite see yet. And I was okay with that. But I didn't like the movie at first. It was fine, but I didn't like it. Then I was talking with some friends, the Steelies, who had seen it and were aware of it months before. The Oscar season had been coming around, and they saw it come out, and they were rooting for it all the way. And that was one movie that, hit everything just right for to win an Oscar award. But it might have been just small. Like that was its one thing. But it won. It won it all. And they were so happy. And I was like, why are you happy? Why is this one such a huge push for you guys? So it was about a year later, then I watched it again. And I started to watch it and go, oh, I see why they're filming it like this. I see why your camera is like this. I see why the acting is like this. I understand why this is making me so uncomfortable at times, because that's intent. But not only sometimes is it not making me uncomfortable, but I like it now because I understand what's happening. Watching it over and over, and then I actually can see the emotion. Like it's such a small beginning. Like it's a very humble and tiny opening. In a sense, like you think it's only going to be about a few things, but then it keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger until the very end, it comes right back to the beginning. Like I would describe it as like a top that gets fat and then just zips right back to the middle. And I haven't seen much of that, where the character study blew up into, the big world, and then it went all the way back to reminding us that no, the friendship between these two guys is the heart at this, and this is what's going to push this man through, one of the most difficult times in world history at that point, for not only the world, but especially for him, and a job that would probably eventually kill him because it was just so stressful for him. That being said, that was the pinnacle of the movie that just opened the world of filmmaking for me. Like, I have movies that are favorites before then or after then, but that one is just a pinnacle of like everything. And it's like everything clicked just right. Like, I've seen some Tom Hooper movies since then, and he's good. Like, he did Les Miserables, but he's also done some things I don't really care to watch or didn't really feel as much. Not all period pieces work for me. Not all acting movies work for me. Not all writing works for me. Not all the categories. Not all of them work for me, but I still recognize them. That's the movie where or the emotions. Not all the emotions sometimes land for me. That hit everything. Everything that encompasses what I look for in a film. That hit everything.
Okay.
And that is why King's Speech is my favorite, and it becomes more my favorite every time I see it. I hope that answers in some way.
Your favorite of the decade. My
favorite of the decade, and it will probably be my favorite for a very long time.
Of course.
Filmsquid.
So, yeah.
Okay. Well.
Whew. 2010s. Whew, that was a good year. That was a good that was a good decade.
Yeah.
Okay. Your turn.
My turn.
Yeah. So, do you want to start from 2010?
Yep.
So, your list is so we all do.
I did it differently.
Yes.
What I did is I went,
and it's been edited.
Yes, it has been edited specifically because of this last year. But I also saw a couple movies from 2010 and 2014 that kind of swapped things around a bit, because those years were very hard. And when I saw these films that I hadn't seen before, I was like, this deserves a spot.
Okay. So I'll just take some notes on that. So let's start at 2010. You did top 5 from each year. So let's start at 2010. At the bottom, you have Inception. You have Social Network, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, Incendies, and True Grit.
Yes. So, Inception. This one isn't my favorite Christopher Nolan film. That one is actually my favorite Christopher Nolan film. Is actually kind of a tie between Memento and The Prestige.
That's what I was thinking.
Which we've talked about that before, and I think Inception is right below that, and then actually Batman Begins.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes. So Inception is not as, like, I loved it, and I loved watching it, especially going into the theater and seeing it a few times. I don't remember how many times I saw it in the theater, but I saw it enough to be like, yeah, I'm a Chris Nolan fan. But
definitely,
it's not. I still don't hold it as high as other people hold it. I never really have. I understand when they hold it that high, but I don't know why I still didn't quite hold it that high. And I have my own pet theory about it, which I won't really get into. Maybe we'll get into it later, or maybe I'll write a post specifically about that. But do you remember what I wrote about, or what I told you about my pet theory for Inception?
I remember you telling me, but I forgot the actual theory.
Okay, I'll tell you later.
Yeah.
The Social Network.
You just saw that.
I just saw that last month.
Yeah, and it cracked. It cracked to the top 5.
Immediately cracked to the top list of my favorite films from 2010.
And that was an ad. You removed, you've seen 2 actually, so we'll move up to, Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah, that one I've just always loved.
You've been trying to get me to watch
There's something special about that one, and we've watched it several times here, and you always seem to be missing from that. So
Sorry.
one of these days, you'll be here and we'll watch it.
Yep.
So in 2010, I removed, to make room for these two films that I saw The Social Network, and I saw Incendies, which is Denis Villeneuve's
yeah, we talked about that
second film after he came back from his hiatus.
Mm-hmm.
He made two films like at the turn of the millennia, August 32nd and Maelstrom, like 1999 and 2000 or 2001, something like that. And then he didn't make a movie for like 9 years or 8 years until Polytechnic, which was about a Montreal mass shooting at Polytechnic.
I remember you telling me that
University, and that one was chilling just to see it. It's short, it's brief, and it's just enough to get your heart racing.
Mm.
But Incendies is it's a whole nother level of filmmaking and of storytelling. It's like, this is where, like, if I was old enough to pay attention to directors at the time, that one probably would have been immediately up there. And I would have like shouted to the hills of like, watch Denis Villeneuve, his movies are going to be great. And then evidently they are.
Yep.
This movie is proof.
Yep.
This one, it hits something completely different than the movies that I'd seen around that time period. And even among Denis Villeneuve's films, his filmography, it's still it's my second favorite of his.
Wow. Okay.
It's high up there. And you've heard enough praise from me about Villeneuve.
Every Villeneuve movie in the past 10 years is in this list, by the way.
Well, maybe.
Check that. Arrival is not, but
right. That one was a tough year. So
it was close. It was
just
close.
saying that is close to being my favorite Villeneuve film
in the
should
past
be enough.
couple months. Yeah.
It does something completely. I was not expecting it at all. I wanted it to be as high. Like, I was watching his older films. I was watching Enemy. I watched, and then I watched Prisoners with You. I watched Polytechnic, and then this one's the last one that I watched of his current era. And I was so elated that I was like, this is like almost peak Villeneuve. And it's only his second film in his current era.
And it's funny because you have mentioned every time you've watched Denis Villeneuve films again, they get better.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a feeling, and I'm going to make a gambly prediction that this might be your favorite eventually.
Maybe.
So, but
not sure. There are some things keeping me back from saying that, but
I mean, Blade Runner 2049 is
that's still
a big beast.
Yeah.
But
in more ways than one. But
there's just something, though, really special about early films.
So with these two films, with David Fincher's The Social Network and Denis Villeneuve's Incendies, they kicked out Toy Story 3 and, curiously, The King's Speech.
Understandable. I will forgive that one.
But also, True Grit remains the top of mine in 2010.
Yeah.
For good reason.
Yeah.
I think it's my second favorite Coen Brothers movie.
After No Country for Old Men?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's my, probably one of my favorite Westerns from the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
2011.
This one's kind of an outlier. This one doesn't have a whole lot.
Yeah.
But it's got some good entries, I think.
So you've got Harry Potter, which is funny, I had as a honorable mention. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. Warrior, which I love, but I couldn't find a spot for it. The Artist, Hugo, and I have not seen this.
Yes.
Headhunters.
This one was a complete surprise when I watched it. And I watched it 2013, 2014, something like that. It was on Netflix at the time. It's not on Netflix anymore. It's a Swedish film. And it has such a heart-pumping thrill. It goes so high, so fast, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat. It grabs your throat and it doesn't let go for the whole 100 minutes.
Sounds familiar.
Right. Which, curiously, the guy who wrote the book that it's based on, and I think he adapted also, he made like a story treatment for the script. The writer for that, his name is Joe Nesbo. He is working with Denis Villeneuve on a movie called The Sun, S-O-N, The Sun. And it's tentatively in the next couple years.
I mean, Dune's got to come out
Yeah,
first.
but it's Denis Villeneuve and Joe Nesbo. Like these, like I am so ready for that one that I can't even contain my excitement. Anyways, Headhunters. If you can find this, and that's a big if because that's hard. This is going to be hard to find. If you can find this and you like action, thrill, just like adrenaline, this one is really high up there. And it also has a surprising amount of heart to it. A surprising amount of like characters going through and talking to each other and being vulnerable with each other and opening up. It's just like, it's not what you expect in that film because it's all about art heists and killers chasing someone. And it's just like this, it just goes up a level and then the next scene goes up another level. It's, oh man, I can't say enough about it. It's just so surprising of a film. And that's one of the first foreign films that I fell in love with.
That's high praise. Yeah. Are you aware of the website Just Watch It? I think it's what it's called. JustWatch.com.
I've seen it. I think.
I just discovered that, and it's quite a useful tool to find movies available to stream, especially for free.
Right.
I'm probably going to start using that for a lot of the Sight and Sound movies that we need to start watching
of course.
soon. But
we should probably get a joint Criterion Channel subscription and just watch a bunch of those films because that would be a good investment for us in terms of watching old films. Anyways,
I'm learning a lot. Yeah.
So
good point.
Warrior.
Yeah, tell me about Warrior. When did you watch Warrior?
I watched it with my family.
When? Like when it came out, or
a year after it came out? It was probably Redboxed or
okay.
rental or something.
What made you like a boxing movie? This is a meme movie. This is totally a meme movie. I'm surprised you liked this one.
Tom Hardy and Joel Edgerton just absolutely blew me away with their acting.
That is a stellar acting movie.
Was not expecting this at all. I went into this thinking it was just going to be like a sports movie. Just be like, okay, well, we're watching a bunch of guys hit each other. Like, no, this is punching you in your heart more than it's punching you in your face.
This is
this is a very hard movie to watch emotionally.
I loved Roger Ebert's review where he said about Warrior, this is one of those rare boxing matches where you don't want to cheer for either side and you don't want either side to lose.
Oh yeah.
You're
like, you understand each of them and you
want it to be over.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. You want the end
I don't
to come.
want this to keep going. Stop. Whoever's going to win, just win.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're both so stubborn.
Yeah.
Okay. Hugo, we've already talked about. The Artist, we've already talked about. Harry Potter. So we've talked about that basically.
A little bit, because you recently got introduced by my family.
Right. And I think it's only up there because it's one of the last ones. It's the only one in this decade, basically.
Yeah.
Or was the part one? Part one was in 2010, right? Was it?
I can't remember.
Hold on, I'll find it in a second. Yeah, that was 2010. But it just doesn't. It
was a part one.
Quite. It's like it's too much of a setup to really be satisfying.
It's a good setup.
It is a good setup, but it's too much of a setup to be satisfying.
Yeah,
it needs to have this second.
Plus,
one. That's kind of just mine, almost an honorable mention, and also it was kind of hard to fill that slot. For 2011 for me.
Okay,
I don't know why. But yeah, 2012.
2012. I like this list. Starting out with Looper.
Mm-hmm. Ryan Johnson.
Yeah.
My first Ryan Johnson.
Mm-hmm. Lincoln. Nice.
Yep.
Moonrise Kingdom. I have not seen that yet. Django Unchained and Avengers. Man, Avengers just blew everybody away.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's up there for a reason as my favorite film of 2012.
Yeah.
So Looper was one of those that that same group that we watched Hitchcock and Ghibli films, we watched this one together.
That's random.
I know. We're just a bunch of friends that we liked back before we even knew a lot of people at the art school, just a lot of people from my high school We just watched a bunch of these films randomly. It was just like someone just brought it to the meeting where we played games, we talked, and then we watched a movie. And someone just brought that, and I'm like, this is so good. I love this so much.
It's surprisingly good. I can see why they gave Star Wars to Rian Johnson because of that movie.
Oh, yeah. Well, he has such a way of setting up rules for his films and things that the audience can understand and then apply later on, either to apply it just straight or to apply it as like breaking that rule. And Looper does some very interesting things with time travel, because time travel is very messy genre of subgenre of sci-fi to work with.
It's difficult
because you get into paradoxes easily. You get into repeats, recursive things easily. This one sets it up nicely, and it follows its own rules. It keeps its rules very consistent because it has to.
That's the big thing about
That's
time
why
travel.
it's still a good time travel sci-fi movies, because it keeps its rules and it uses those rules to tell its story. And also it has such a good cast. Like, this was one of the first, like, obviously I love Bruce Willis, but it has Emily Blunt, and it has Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Paul Dano. Like, all these people, like, this was like the first exposure to them that I'd seen, other than maybe The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. Like, maybe that's the only one I've ever seen with,
Joseph
Gordon-Levitt. And it just had that, like, you could tell there's more from these actors that you're going to see. When you see a movie and you're like, I need to see more of this actor's stuff. Like recently, Jake Gyllenhaal for you.
Yes. That's a good one. Yep. There's a lot of movies on my watch list with Jake Gyllenhaal now.
Okay. Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit.
That was, I think, my third
Wes
Anderson film. The first one I saw was Fantastic Mr. Fox.
That's usually everybody's.
The second one I saw, I think it was
Was it Life Aquatic?
Royal Tenenbaums.
Oh, okay.
So it was kind of like the opposite end. Like, you get Fantastic Mr. Fox, the zany characters, and then you get Royal Tenenbaums, which is just a classic family drama kind of thing with just a bunch of characters and you can't really tell what's going on. And then I saw Grand Budapest Hotel, which instantly, like, I watched it twice in a row.
You mean
in one sitting? Kingdom? No, I'm saying.
Oh, I see.
Oh,
Moonrise Kingdom.
I don't remember the order. Ignore what I said about the order. After I saw Grand Budapest Hotel, I went back to his movies, and Moonrise Kingdom was the first one that I watched after that. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to, because I had to figure out exactly which ones I'd seen. Anyways, regardless, ignore the order. This one surprised me, and it's one of my favorite of Wes Anderson's. It's very whimsical. It's very charming. It's very just heartwarming. And it's so beautifully told.
Which, I'm tentative about. You might have to just sit me down and watch this thing. Because I watch the concept, or I read the concept, and it seems almost alarming to me. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't know if this is good. Like, actually good.
Right.
A good concept. And it seems strange to me. But maybe I'm missing something? I don't know. I probably am. In fact, no, I know I'm missing something because there's people who gush over Fantastic Mr. Fox. I don't gush over Fantastic Mr. Fox. The closest Wes Anderson film that I like is probably, what's it called? It's the
Darjeeling Limited.
Darjeeling Limited. That's probably the most heartfelt one for me. Which a lot of Wes Anderson fans are like, yeah, that's a good one.
Right, and they don't put it as high as you do, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm kind of on the odd end of Wes Anderson, but please educate me on that one. That's what I'm asking.
Okay, I'll show that to you. Django, obviously.
Yeah.
Lincoln, obviously. We've talked about those enough.
So now we're beginning the years where I'm actually really interested in, because I was very aware, because we've talked about them on this podcast from like 2016 onwards, but these ones I haven't quite.
I think all of these I watched after we started doing this podcast. I think every single one that I've watched from 2013, I saw after we started the podcast.
That's interesting.
Which is a very interesting thing. Although, no, not really, because the one that takes the first place I've watched in theaters.
True, yeah. We'll get to that one. 2013, The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, Gravity, 12 Years a Slave, Prisoners, and The Wind Rises. Thank you for giving Wind Rises in this podcast the credit it deserves. I wanted to.
Oh, yes.
But
this one was very special.
It is
very special. It was the first Ghibli film I saw in theaters. And it was, like I said before, it was when my group of friends that I previously mentioned all went and watched it together. And also, I related to it immediately because the main character also deals with nearsightedness. Ooh. And like one of the first things that he does is he puts on his glasses and the world isn't blurry anymore. I'm like, okay, I'm already attached to this character just by that physical trait alone. But also I'm attached to that character because he's a dreamer. And he spends too much time in his head thinking about the things that he dreams about and
that aren't possible.
The things that people tell him he can't do. And I relate to that. Especially at that time. I related to that a lot. It's gone down a little bit in terms of my Ghibli order, simply because rewatching it doesn't quite have the same feel. Maybe because it's not with people I love. Like when I watched it again, it wasn't in the theater. So it has a different feel. Because really, like watching any movie in the theater really like brings a whole other thing. That's why
because you're with people who
that's why
want
me and you love
well.
Whisper of the Heart so much. If we watched that on the small screen, we probably wouldn't have the same reaction.
Yeah, you're right.
Which kind of makes me think, like, what movies have we loved that we watched on DVD or Blu-ray and we should have watched for the first time in theaters?
It's a good question.
Unfortunate
we'll
situation
never know the
to be in.
Yeah.
We can't remedy the situation unless we see, something out on the horizon, like the Hollywood theater is playing this movie that we haven't seen. Let's go watch it because it's actually a projected film and we can see it.
That changes ideas, though, like The Searchers, for example, for me.
Right.
So it's totally possible.
Okay. Princess Kaguya is it's the only non-Miyazaki Ghibli film that's up there in the Ghibli films, just because it's so gosh darn beautiful. The animation and the animation and the art is so stylized, but so incredibly detailed. Not incredibly detailed, but incredibly emotionally detailed.
Yes, where it
puts
counts,
so much into it, and so much of the story comes through into the art and the animation, the way the characters move in their very simple, like very minimalist line drawings. It's so different to the other Ghibli films, and I think it rises up because of everything going in. It's just so beautiful. It's so good to look at and watch. It's I don't know why.
Have you only seen it once?
Yes.
Okay, maybe watch it again.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Gravity.
Alfonso Cuarón.
Have you seen Gravity?
Flex. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So some of these like in the middle, like before we started the podcast in 2010, like some of these I'm not quite entirely sure if you've seen them, but Gravity.
I've seen most of them, yeah.
Gravity was very, very interesting. I was not expecting it. I almost like the behind the scenes because they do a long on the Blu-ray I watched right after I watched the movie. I watched the behind the scenes making of, and it's probably about 60-70 minutes long, or maybe shorter than that, but I almost like that more than the movie, just in terms of what the movie makes me feel. But it really heightened everything that I saw. I needed to watch it again. That's still the only time I've watched it, is when I watched both of those together.
Okay.
So watching it again will probably do away with that silly notion that I just had. But still, it's so unexpectedly simple but beautiful. How many camera rigs did they have to shoot Sandra Bullock? They had something like 7, 8, 9 different camera rigs
Jeez.
just to get her to look like she's floating in space.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of the rest of it was CGI.
Yep.
And like they were one of the first ones to really do like projected light simulation to get CGI to line up with the only thing that the filmmakers keep, which is mostly the face, especially Marvel. Marvel, like if they're doing a CGI character, they still keep like the face because it's the hardest thing to do and the most expensive thing to do, as The Irishman showed us.
Yeah. No kidding.
But they keep the face, the actual shooting of the face, the filming of the face. But to get the right light and to get the right reflections, they did most of the film in a light box. 6 walls with LEDs on each side, just shining light on Sandra Bullock's face as she's twisting and turning in space. And then they just take her face. It's beautiful. 12 Years a Slave. I don't
hard to watch.
That's very hard to watch.
I'm not sure I'll watch it again. It was so hard to watch.
I probably will watch it again, but it's probably when I just show it to someone.
Yeah.
Prisoners. Talked about that enough.
We've talked about
it's up there. It's really high up there on the Villeneuve list, which is hard to say because almost every film on Villeneuve is up there for me. And
you have like one and then 7 twos.
You already know. Just watch them. Just watch all of them. Okay.
2014. Okay, so
this is a really hard year.
This was a tentpole year for you. You have Guardians of the Galaxy, Big Eyes, interesting. Winter Soldier, Captain America, What We Do in the Shadows, okay, and Grand Budapest Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
This looks like for my 2010 was your 2014. Am I too far off in saying that?
I guess
this looks
probably.
like a year where you like started to go underneath tentpoles, if that makes any sense, and go, what else is out there? Like really
kind of. I mean, there's a lot of incredible films in 2014, and there's still ones that I haven't seen from 2014.
But do you have a big watch list for 2014?
I think so. I think Whiplash was 2014.
Oh, yep.
And I think Her was 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Both of which I still haven't seen. So, and then things that I'd seen before, just in the last couple of years, like Nightcrawler and Ex Machina and Gone Girl. Like 2014 was a very stacked year.
Yeah.
But these ones, I think I just decided like they affected me enough emotionally that I just had to bring them up above the rest of them.
Okay.
Like the temples are still there. Like Captain America and Mad Max and Guardians of the Galaxy, or not Mad Max, sorry. Captain America and Guardians are still up there. Those are temples.
Yeah.
But Big Eyes, that was unexpected.
Big Eyes is good.
That one, it's a Tim Burton film. It's probably my second favorite Tim Burton film.
But it doesn't feel like a Tim Burton film.
It doesn't. But I don't know if there's another director that would do it better.
No.
So that's the thing going for Tim Burton with that.
I saw the trailer and I was like, yes, this is Tim Burton.
Mm-hmm.
Watching it, a little bit different, but very unique. Very unique.
What We Do in the Shadows, that's Taika Waititi.
Was this the first one? Okay,
yes.
That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yes.
When I saw that on the list.
And then I watched Hunt for the Wilder People very soon after that.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I'll say in a moment.
Yeah.
And then Grand Budapest Hotel, which I've said enough about that. That's one of my favorite movies, like ever. So
I need to see that again because there's a disconnect between you and me on that one.
Huh.
I liked it, but then
it's
everyone gushed about it. And I was like, even my sisters were gushing about it. And I was like, there's something I'm not getting here. I'm not sure what it is.
I think it's nuanced and full of little details enough to compare it to like a Paul Thomas Anderson or a Coen Brothers, where you just have to see it again.
Yeah, but you got it right away.
I saw it again right away. So that's why I love it so much. If I just saw it once, I'd probably have a different opinion. And I've seen it several times since. But it's remained one of my favorite.
I've only seen it once.
It's remained one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
And it's an outlier for Wes Anderson in a way, because he does more subdued, simple, one location kind of. This is an adventure film.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's also like he's done really good, like he's had good examples of his style come out. But this is the first time I think in all of his filmography where his style is through the entire movie. There's not 1 second where it's like that could be from another film or that could be a different type. It's like, I don't know what he's evoking, but throughout this entire movie of Grand Budapest, it's Wes Anderson. 100%.
Didn't this one win Best Cinematography?
I believe it did.
I'm tempted to think so. I'd have to look it up, but yeah, I'm kind of remembering that.
I know it won Best Music.
Yes, I remember that. That was the spot.
I think it won Best Cinematography, but I'm not entirely sure.
I'll look that up later.
Okay, 2015.
2015.
Which I kind of already spoiled because I just mentioned that name before.
Okay.
They're right next to each other in this list.
You start off with Cinderella.
Yeah, that's an interesting pick, isn't it?
I was very interested in that. Understandable, but I want to hear more in a second. Force Awakens. Okay. The Martian, the sleeper hit of that year. I remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Sicario. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Mad Max Fury Road. Okay.
Yep.
I have questions. Cinderella.
Cinderella.
Why Cinderella?
Um,
Why Cinderella over everything else?
So this was around the time when I watched all of the Disney movies.
Okay.
You remember this? Like we started the podcast like in the middle of me watching all of the Disney films, like all the animated films, all the animated feature-length Disney films.
Right.
And I watched through all of them. I haven't actually finished a couple of them. But I went from Snow White all the way to Tangled at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it struck me that some of them don't quite hold the same timelessness.
Some of the animated films?
Yes. Cinderella doesn't quite, for me, doesn't quite
Okay.
hold the timelessness that the story itself holds. Like there's some flaws and some interesting choices they made to tell that story in that animated form for 1950. But it was good enough that it brought back Disney into that conversation, because for all of the 40s they were just kind of floundering because it was during the war and it was post-war. They weren't really doing much, and then Cinderella was just like a return to form for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand why it's still such a classic, but in terms of telling its story, I don't think it did as well as some of the other classic Disney movies that told their story. Like Pinocchio, I wasn't expecting to like it as much this time I watched it once again.
Yeah.
So going back to that, Cinderella, the new one, the 2015 Kenneth Branagh one, it told the story so beautifully. And if I was to pick any one incarnation of the story of Cinderella, I would watch this one.
Not to mention, this is kind of the shining example of how to do the remake correctly.
Yes. And it was the first one.
Right.
And it's been downhill from that since then.
Somehow everything went wrong after that. But it's we've talked about this before. It's weird. There's a lot of things you have to get just right on the remakes.
Not only is it a great film in and of itself, but it's the best remake that Disney's done, in my opinion.
I would agree on that.
So that's why that's up there.
Mm-hmm.
Force Awakens, pretty obvious. It's a tentpole. It's great. I loved it. I still love it. The Martian. I almost actually listened to the audiobook back when it was first put out.
Okay, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or read the book, or I almost got it from the library and read it before I watched the movie. But when I watched the movie, I still haven't gone back or listened to it or read it, but I still think like, what would I think differently about it if I did that? Because I love The Martian so much. It's like one of the best intelligent sci-fi films of the last couple years.
That's for sure. Yes.
And there's only a few flaws with it that bring it down. Sicario.
Specifically the first half.
Oh yeah.
That's an incredible thriller.
This is the first Villeneuve movie I saw. It's Denis Villeneuve.
Really?
the first one I saw. And then the year after, you and I went and saw Arrival. And after we saw Arrival, I'm like, he's like probably going to be my favorite director. It's like, that's what I said basically when we walked out of the theater.
I remember that.
You do remember that.
Yep.
And then Blade Runner came and just proved that, and he's my favorite director since Blade Runner. And Sicario was my first introduction, and it's been better. It's been like, I go back to it every once in a while and I watch it. I'm like, this still has such an incredible atmosphere and feeling. And then there's Mad Max Fury Road.
Mad Max.
Which, I mean, that's up there in terms of my favorite films.
Yeah.
So we talked enough about that. And it's like George Miller's just a mad genius. So 2016.
2016. Curious, you did knock out Silence this year. In favor of La La Land, which is the leading one for this year. Then you had, leading as far as leading that I'm talking about. Then you had Hacksaw Ridge, then Rogue One. Nice. 10 Cloverfield Lane. That's surprising. And Hunt for the Wilder People.
Yep.
Okay.
Hunt for the Wilder People is my favorite Taika Waititi film. If you liked Jojo Rabbit, if you saw Jojo Rabbit, if you liked Thor Ragnarok, I highly recommend you go and check out Hunt for the Wilder People. It's a very touching, very funny, very heartfelt movie about someone who just isn't wanted and what it does to a kid who feels like they're unwanted. And it's hilarious as well. Sam Neill plays in it. And it's Taika's best. It's his best movie. Still.
Okay. Send me down for that one too.
La La Land. I rewatched it recently, or not recently, but a while ago. So when I made this list initially, I put Silence up there.
Yeah.
Because that one really affected us, and it's going to be a while before we actually see that again, just because it's so hard to watch.
Yeah.
Both its length and its content. But La La Land, just thinking about it and watching it again and reading more about it, the making of, all the things that go on with it, like, I felt like it deserved to be up there.
Also deserves to be in other places, but that's another discussion.
Yep. Hacksaw Ridge, we've talked about that, I think, enough. Like, it's just such a good story that people don't know that you should know.
Yeah.
It's important. Rogue One, still the best Disney Star Wars.
Okay, I really want to see Rogue One again because I am discovering that there was more. Okay, not only was this in production hell for a long time, but somehow masterful touches were always involved and lasted through that. Considering music, design, all that kind of stuff. I'm very excited to watch Rogue One again. 10 Cloverfield Lane.
I know, this one's
I
kind of
haven't
surprising.
seen that. I've only seen Cloverfield.
This one, see, I haven't seen Cloverfield.
This is really interesting. I'm not going to actually ask much about this one because
I think enough can be said just through it's got incredible blocking and camera work.
Well, I know
it's
in an underground bunker.
It's a constrained, claustrophobic movie centered around 3 characters. And John Goodman just really, like, he commands the screen as this movie's antagonist. It's a monster movie about humans.
Whew.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Okay, yeah, don't say anything else.
Okay, 2017. This one is a really good one too.
Yes, it is. This is kind of where we draw the line between, okay, now I'm starting to like go, yeah, I knew this one.
And this is kind of where we started branching out more into more recent art house kind of films. Or recent indie films.
So we got Thor Ragnarok, which is
obvious
tentpole, but Taika Waititi taking his toll.
It's one of my favorite Marvel films. So
yeah. Baby Driver,
Yep.
Get Out, Lady Bird, and Blade Runner 2049.
This was actually kind of difficult to decide whether I wanted to put Lady Bird or Blade Runner up. But I decided because Blade Runner is still so, I just gush over that film and I love it so much that, and it's still my favorite.
You have a different gush for Lady Bird.
I put it up there, but yeah, it is a different sentiment that I have for Lady Bird. And it will change throughout. Like there's some weeks or months or years that I might say, no, I liked Lady Bird more than Blade Runner.
Sure.
And then the other way around. It's like these two films, they just affect you on such a different way. That's like when your mood changes,
you want to watch a different one.
It's like
that's
your thoughts
that's
on
just
things
movie
change.
watching. Yeah.
But Lady Bird is still one of those that really rises above all the other ones.
Yeah.
And it's Greta Gerwig. Like, I'm going to watch every single movie that she makes now. I've seen every movie she makes in theaters. I'm going to see every movie she makes in theaters. I love her. She's just so good at giving us such incredible stories about people who feel so real.
Mm-hmm. I think that's her strong point, is the feels.
Yes.
Like feels. There's like I haven't heard a director talk about feels more powerfully than she does.
And honestly.
Yes. You've got a really strong
She's
point there.
Honest, emotional filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 2018.
2018. Starting off with Avengers Infinity War.
I think this was kind of, I don't know why exactly. I feel like I should have reordered it. I don't know why. I think something else deserves to be up there because I didn't like Infinity War as much.
Just about to say that. You've kind of soured
I
about
have
Infinity
said that
War.
before. I'm not sure what to put up there yet. And there are some films that I still need to see from that year.
Okay.
Namely, Roma, The
Yes.
Favorite, Star is Born, other things like that. Other things that were kind of up in the awards season like that. So 2018 is just kind of like an
unfinished year.
Yeah, it feels a little more
flexible.
Exactly.
Then you've got Fallout. That's not dropping.
Yep.
Basically, it's a war to replace Infinity War. It looks like because these next four won't be dropped.
Are just gonna be. They're just gonna stay there.
Quiet Place. Leave No Trace.
We've talked enough about that.
And Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
And we talked enough about that.
Yeah. Talk about Fallout though, just a little bit.
So, this was one of those that I was going to see it. We were going to see it.
Yes, I remember the story.
And I'm sure we were planning on seeing it, but we saw it earlier than we anticipated because we were going to see Leave No Trace.
Right.
And we were going to see it with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got to the theater, there was no showing, even though it was advertised.
They canceled it.
The showing.
Who cancels? I've never seen a canceled movie since then.
It was very strange, and yeah, that was very disappointing. But the silver lining of that whole experience was this incredible action movie that really took us for a ride.
Which was probably a better choice.
Which heightened it.
Yeah.
It heightened our experience because we were expecting just to be like, okay, fine, let's just go see Mission Impossible Fallout, whatever. And then we're like, oh, wow, this is good.
Which, considering our company at the time, that was probably a better choice anyway.
Okay. And then 2019. We talked about 2019 enough.
A lot.
But I did want to mention that I moved things around for this because when I initially made this list,
there are different things. You dropped a lot.
On New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
Of 2019, New Year's Eve. And I saw a lot of the Best Picture nominees in the last 2 months.
So let's see. You dropped Jojo Rabbit, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and Alita Battle Angel. All good movies.
Mm-hmm.
But 2019 has been such a bomb house year that...
And Endgame actually topped my list initially.
Oof.
Right?
Yeah, let's move that. Okay, so your list now.
And in replacing that one, it's still up there, but yeah.
Yeah. We've got Klaus.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about that one. Endgame at 4. Parasite, Little Women, and 1917.
Yep.
That just right there shows you.
It feels complete for me in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because I couldn't remove Klaus.
No,
because
gosh,
it's
please don't.
for my experience, it's the best 2D animated film for decades.
It's not
because
often
there hasn't been any 2D animated films for so long, and not only that, it's a good movie.
It's not often.
I couldn't drop it from my favorites.
No, please don't.
And then Endgame, I couldn't drop it just because it's such a remarkable.
It's a remarkable
cornerstone of the entire MCU, which is just not never going to happen again. And then these other three films, which just instantly shot up to my favorites of all time. Like 2019 was a standout year for films. And I saw most of the good ones in the last month in 2020. So
we had a really good beginning and end to this decade, I'm noticing.
We did.
It's almost like 2010 was literally an introduction year. We've been talking about that just about in life recently, you and I. And not the movies was just one of them. That's just the thing we happen to talk about on the podcast. And, doors open, eyes opening, going out to explore. And then 2019, we end with the first year that we ever saw all the best pictures, just to exemplify that. And have a full opinion on every single
from here
time.
on out.
It's still tentative that we will do that.
Like, I think it's more likely that we will.
Yeah.
But I feel like for me, I think I'm going to try to watch every Best Picture nominee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just because it's such a good perspective to see
what's going on,
what the awards season holds up and what film holds up. Like what's left out from there that we saw and loved, and what is considered best and why it's considered best. Because there's some things that you don't understand why they're considered best until years later. You're like, okay, now I see why.
And some that we consider amazing now, which will probably be the same way. We'll probably be like, that actually didn't hold up very well.
Oof.
But that's what
2010s.
That's what multiple viewings are for.
The 20-teens.
The 20-teens are good.
Oof.
20-teens were a good time. But now we have a new decade.
Now we have a new decade to turn to and look forward to.
Which we will be talking about in our next episode. Tell us what you guys have liked from the 2010s and tell us what we should watch. Or what you think of our list and our arrangements. Did we mess things up? Were we absolutely correct? What does your list look like? We are very curious to hear. Thanks for listening, everybody.
We'll see you next time.